I experienced 4 terrifying realities of déjà vu that almost drowned me in madness. I never should have opened that door. The moment I did, a chill swept over me like a freezing wave crashing onto my chest. It felt like the air turned viscous, thick with dread. I was just getting my usual cup of coffee, the comforting aroma filling my small kitchen, when I noticed its door, cracked open, shadows flickering behind it. Curiosity and fear wrestled inside me. The house was silent, like the calm before a storm. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the windows. It was supposed to be a relaxing Saturday. Instead, tension crept in. A whispering sound danced through the air, echoing everything I feared. I shrugged it off. Maybe it was just the tree branches scraping against the house. As I stepped closer to the door, I felt my heartbeat quicken. My breath quickened too. A faint creak whispered from the other side, and I hesitated. Prickles of anxiety raced down my spine. Just then, the lights flickered. Shadows danced along the walls, stretching and contorting, teasing me to look. Just open it, I thought. It's nothing. But my gut twisted. What if it was something? With trembling hands, I pushed the door. An icy draft surged out, wrapping around me like fingernails scraping down my skin. I froze. Nothing stirred behind the door, but I could feel a weight of presence. Then, the creepy noises began. A soft rustle, like something being dragged across the floor. I leaned in closer, and that's when the room shifted. Reality warped. Every sense went on high alert. I was stuck in a loop this moment, déjà vu long before I realized it. The door loomed larger. My heart thundered. Suddenly, an object crashed to the ground behind me, and I spun around. My breath hitched. All shelves collapsed in a cascade of fragments like shattered memories. Panic surged, filling my veins. I turned back to the door, my thoughts racing. What's waiting for me? All at once, I heard my name, barely a whisper but so familiar. Fear sank its claws deep into me. I staggered back. The door trembled, almost as if it breathed. I wanted to scream, but my voice betrayed me. The shadows flickered more violently now, and I felt dizzy like I was spiraling into another reality. A figure appeared, just at the edge of the darkness. A silhouette, shifting and shrouded in gloom. My heart stopped. I could barely breathe. The figure stepped toward me, and the world fell away. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the figure drew closer, the shadows clung to it like a shroud. My heart crashed against my ribcage, a frantic prisoner desperate for escape. An unsettling chill crawled up my spine, each vertebrae lighting up with electric fear. The air grew heavier, suffocating, pressing against my lungs as the silhouette morphed into something more defined, something horrifying. Help me, it rasped, its voice a mournful echo that seemed to resonate from the walls themselves. A sound so hollow, so chilling, that it pierced straight to my core. My hands instinctively shot up to defend myself, but my mind raced in turmoil. Was it a threat, or was it begging? I wanted to flee, but my feet were roots, anchored into the floor. I thought I saw a flicker of recognition in its empty, shadowed face. It was only a fleeting thought but powerful enough to freeze me in place. The figure looked like someone I lost years ago. Somehow, I felt drawn to it, magnetized against my will. The world swirled as I struggled with my defiance. My heartbeat echoed, a haunting drum in my ears. Meanwhile, the shadows began to surge and pulse as if alive, swirling around me, tugging at my skin. I shut my eyes tightly, taking a deep, shaking breath. When I opened them again, the figure was closer, its features beginning to sharpen out of the obscurity that I forced myself to meet its gaze, and terror slammed into me like a freight train as I realized I was staring into my own eyes, twisted and hollow. My reflection stared back at me, mocking, filled with sorrow, pain, and a haunting desperation. "Remember," it whispered, a low, mournful timbre that threatened to unravel me. The air thickened as it reached out a hand, fingers elongated and contorted, beckoning me to come closer. My mind spiraled at the weight of the warning buried within those two words. I felt the embers of déjà vu reignite, fusing past memories with this present horror. "What do you want?" I forced myself to croak, my voice barely piercing through the suffocating dread. Every logical part of me screamed to shut the door once and for all. "To warn you," the figure rasped, voice cracking like brittle glass. "You can't trust what's real anymore. He's coming." Through the cacophony of whispers echoing in my mind, I heard a distant thumping. A slow, steady beat resembling footsteps, creeping closer from the hallway. My gut twisted violently as I recognized that sound as the final tick of a clock counting down to my fate. My body went rigid, an involuntary paralysis that rooted me to the spot. "Who is coming?" I whispered, dread seeping through my words like a poison. But in response, the figure's expression twisted in horror. Fearful, it pointed behind me, eyes wide with terror that I turned, and every instinct told me not to look. Yet, as if controlled by some unseen force, I spun around slowly. The shadows deepened, darkness pooling with malicious intent at the threshold of the door. The wind howled louder now, a mournful soundtrack to the impending nightmare. There, at the very edge of the light, a figure emerged. Tall, elongated, its limbs draped in darkness, a silhouette of dread, seeping malice with each shuddering breath. And there was no mistaking it. White, hollow eyes glared back at me from the darkness, void of human empathy. The echoing footsteps halted abruptly, and the temperature in the room plummeted. Just as I felt the soul-chilling brush of icy breath against my neck, a deafening crash rang through the house. An unseen force hurled furniture across the room, shattering my fragile sense of safety that I screamed, the sound lost in the chaos as I stumbled backward. The dark figure moved with a fluidity that defied the laws of nature, drawing closer, the whispering intensified me name, repeated, over and over, a terrifying mantra pulling me into the void that I darted for the door, desperation flooding through me, each frantic heartbeat echoing warnings all the while. The shadows grew wider, enveloping me, threatening to draw me into their eternal night. I threw myself into the hallway, intent on escaping, but when I looked back, the room was no longer the same. The door stood closed, seamless, with no trace of the terror behind it. And with a horrifying realization, I heard it me name, this time uttered in a familiar voice, soft and tender, laced with an unfathomable sorrow. "Come home," I hesitated, a lump forming in my throat. I could feel the familiar tug of the past beckoning me closer, but that wretched darkness I momentarily escaped still loomed, hungry and waiting. I was trapped, caught between the damned and the light. The hallway stretched longer than I ever remembered, twisting and warping around me like a snake ready to strike. The words echoed in my mind, "Come home," but who was calling me? The familiar voice felt like velvet and iron wrapped in a shroud of despair. I took a step forward, my heart battling against the instinct to run, to flee from whatever darkness lurked beneath the surface of my memories. "Focus," I whispered harshly to myself. But then the air shimmered oddly, pulsing with the energy of something lurking just out of sight. A cold sweat beaded on my skin as I recalled those hollow eyes. The figure had been so familiar yet grotesquely foreign, a reflection warped by an unknown grief. With shaky hands, I gripped the sagging wallpaper as I tentatively moved down the corridor, each step a battle against the invisible chains attempting to pull me back. Shadows flickered at the corner of my vision, whispering secrets I dared not process. As I edged forward, the faint sound of laughter drifted through the air, haunting and joyous, blending morbid curiosity with the sting of fearful recognition. I forced my eyes to scan every corner, each lingering whisper becoming a knife scraping against my sanity. It was then I noticed the photographs that lined the wall, the faces of lost moments. There I was, smiling, blissful, surrounded by loved ones. Each frame captured fleeting joy, a stark contrast against the backdrop of an ever-encroaching shadow, but then I spotted it, a picture missing from its frame, the glass fractured like a storm-tossed ocean, leaving behind the crumbled remains of what had been a family torn apart. My heart sank, for the laughter had faded, replaced by a triumphant cackle that reverberated through the hallways, chilling the very marrow of my bones. "Come home," it whispered again, the insistence now sharper, dripping with an urgency that prickled my skin. This time, the voice felt like a warm caress, laced with something sinister. I reached the end of the hallway, encountering an open door that pulsed with inviting light. I felt an overpowering urge to step inside, to quell the gnawing hollowness deep within my chest. My feet unfurled towards the threshold, the darkness behind now feeling like a pushed-away truth, lingering at the edges of my consciousness. As I crossed the threshold, it was as though the air shifted, the chilling ambience was replaced by an overwhelming warmth. The room illuminated took my breath away. It was a gorgeous living room, one that felt eerily familiar. A place I had spent many a moment filled with laughter and love. Embroidered cushions littered an overstuffed couch where I'd once curled up with those who'd loved me dearly. A warm glow emanated from the fireplace, shadows dancing along walls painted in soft pastels, inviting tranquility. But lurking beneath every soft surface was the grasp of something unmistakably wrong. In an instant, the serene atmosphere shifted, darkness creeping from the corners, gnawing at the warmth. Suddenly, my name wafted through the air, transforming from a whisper into a cacophony, a multitude of voices reaching a fever pitch. "Come home," they cried, merging into a roiling storm of sound that clawed at my mind. I squeezed my eyes shut, fighting to block it out, but the shadows pressed harder against my body, urging me forward, and just as quickly, the light flickered ominously, each blitz illuminating a horrifying visage among the cheerful faces in the frames. The joyful expressions twisted, morphing into anguished masks of woe that screamed silently, eternally, through the glass. "No!" I yelled, stepping back, but I felt something tug at my ankles, a cold grasp claiming me, dragging me backward. With an almost imperceptible whoosh, the warmth that had enveloped the living room dissolved, and the laughter morphed into screams, echoing and layering into a tortured melody. That I was on the floor, darkness swirling like a tempest around me, and I felt it, a heartbeat synchronized with my own, slow, steady, and all too familiar. Panic seized my throat as I instinctively clutched my chest, realizing those hollow eyes had overcome me. In a distorted reflection of who I once was. A figure emerged from the growing shadows, enveloped in the stench of decay. It was a wraith, vaguely resembling the visage of the family I had lost, but contorted, festooned with the remnants of despair. The frosty breath brushed across my cheek as I locked eyes with the apparition. The edges of reality warped, and ghosts of the past swirled around me like an endless tide. "Rejoin us," the specter pleaded through chattering teeth, its touch as cold as bitter winter. "It's finally time." The ground shifted beneath me, the cozy room collapsing into a void of blackness, and suddenly I was spiraling, consumed by the shadows, pulled into a nightmare of screams and laughter, of hope and despair battling for dominance over my fading consciousness. Then, amidst the terrifying spiral, I saw its door again, shimmering faintly in the distance. My heart raced. Perhaps it was another chance, or perhaps it would be my end, forever lost in the inescapable grip of despair. As I reached for it, the shadows clawed at my back, pulling me deeper into their abyss. "You are one of us now," they shrieked, their voices a crescendo hammering against my ears. "Come home," they whispered once more, and before I could grasp the door's handle, I realized with horror, it had begun to close, sealing shut the final refuge of light, leaving me to rot in the darkness. The darkness wrapped around me like a shroud, suffocating and heavy, each breath a struggle against the tightening grip of despair. The whispers grew louder, echoing in my mind and rendering my thoughts a fraying tapestry of horror and confusion. "You belong to us," they chanted relentlessly, their voices merging into a singular, maddening chorus. That I felt the ground dissolve underneath me, a shifting landscape of nightmares where reality slipped away like water through my fingers. One moment I was chasing the door, and the next, I stood in an entirely different shadowy hallway, one that stretched endlessly in both directions. My heart pounded, the rhythm quickening in response to the chaos of shifting realities around me. The elongated corridor began to morph, the walls pulsated, dripping with a viscous substance that smelled of iron and decay. Dim lights flickered overhead, and each flare illuminated grotesque figures frozen in place, their bodies contorted in silent screams, eyes wide open in terror, entangled in the jagged edges of my fractured memories. Then, in a blur of movement, they started to writhe, their mouths opening and closing in a symphony of agony. I staggered back, suddenly aware of an oppressive weight on my chest that felt all too familiar, a grief so profound it choked me. A whisper followed, so intimate it sent shivers racing down my spine. You know them, you know who they are. Glimmers of recognition flashed throughout my mind, and stars erupted in my vision. Names eluded me, coaxed forth by the shadows, clawing at the edges of my consciousness. Friends lost, laughter turned to sobs, promises unkept. Each wretched reminder struck like a dagger, forcing me to relive their misfortunes, looming specters reflecting back horrors long buried. As the frantic whispers overwhelmed me, I grasped at my temples, trying to block them out. With effort, I shut my eyes against the cacophony of despair, desperate to summon the fragments of strength buried beneath my terror. But the moment I glanced upon the walls again, I froze. The faces were closer now, too close. I felt their dread seep into my bones, the anguished expressions becoming clearer, the shadows solidifying, curling around me like serpents. Among them, a figure emerged, radiant yet marred, drawn by the gravity of emotions that tethered me to my past. I recognized her, a sister lost too soon. My heart twisted painfully, longing to reach her, but as I opened my mouth to call out, the laughter that erupted from her undistorted lips rang hollow in my ears. "Join us. You're almost home," she said, her smile radiant, yet behind the glow lurked depths of her torment and something far worse lurking beneath her cheer. As she reached out to me, I felt a warm breeze ripple past, tethering me to another version of reality, another slice of existence. The corridor twisted, morphing again, and suddenly I was in an attic, surrounded by dust and forgotten dreams. It felt safe, yet the silence turned predatory. I caught glimpses of old toys amid the cobwebs. They stared back with empty eyes as though they longed to tell tales of joy turned sorrow. In the corner, a weathered doll sat with a cracked porcelain face, yet it appeared to blink. Was it an illusion or a cruel trick of my mind? It simulated a mirthless reaction that twisted my insides. Just then, the air thickened, and the temperature dropped sharply, as though all warmth was siphoned away. I turned, and the room erupted with a strange sound. Whispers became frantic shouting, chanting a chorus of lost souls clamoring for my attention. "Find us. Free us," they cried, their voices merging, echoing in a relentless loop. No. "Leave me," I screamed, pushing against the invisible barriers, but the shadows morphed in response, unfurling toward me like an army ready to claim their next victim. Every fiber of my being screamed to resist, yet I faltered, face to face with the ever-expanding darkness threatening to reclaim me. In one last desperate plea, I lunged toward the doll, gripping it tight, seeking whatever comfort it could provide in my tempestuous reality. As my fingers grazed its cold surface, everything faded like smoke, the attic disappearing into a wild whirlpool of shadows, the cursed sight of my sister's haunting laughter rippling in the dim air, and as the darkness remolded itself, I saw it for an instant, a shimmering memory unfurled before me, a final image flickering across the plane of existencia. Funeral, a casket, my family, my past collapsing behind them, leaving me heartbroken. "Forgive us." My sister's voice pierced through the void, fading into the dark as the cacophony swelled, drowning out the last echoes of the world I once knew. Just as the shadows closed in, I felt a pull toward the depth of that shimmering image, an urge to dive back into my memories, to alter the narrative that had driven me to this brink. Yet, as I grabbed for a thread of hope, a sharp exhale brushed past my ear, accompanied by a chilling whisper that sent icy tendrils snaking down my spine. Come home. In that moment, the fabric of reality split open, the very air screaming as a chasm yawned beneath my feet, and I realized I was plummeting once more, caught in the web spun by despair. Home is not where you want to be anymore. And just before I lost sight of everything, the darkness erupted, carving the air with sinister laughter, wrapping around me like barbed vines, and I was left wondering who exactly was calling me home. The moment the darkness consumed me, I surrendered to the inevitable as I spiraled into an abyss different from what I had known. I felt the raw energy of the void envelop me. It caressed my skin with a chilling breath, whispering promises of release. But just as abruptly, I was thrust into another grotesque tableau, a dimly lit diner, its flickering neon sign casting a sickly glow over cracked vinyl booths and a faded checkered floor. The scent of burnt coffee hung heavy in the air, mingling with a metallic tang that raised the hairs on my neck. My heart raced as I registered the patrons dotting the diner, figures cloaked in shadows, their faces obscured by a film of darkness. They sat at their tables, unmoving, frozen in time like forgotten memories. A jukebox sputtered in the corner, screeching out the remnants of a sorrowful love song, the ironic lyrics echoing like a dirge in my ears. As I stumbled through the aisles, my pulse quickened, and an unsettling chill crept down my spine. "Help us," the whisper beckoned from the booth nearest me, pulling my gaze. A young girl sat there, her sunken eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Her face was smeared with blood, and her dress was tattered as if it had once been white. The vibrant innocence of childhood seemed a cruel joke against the backdrop of her decay. "What's happened?" I gasped, leaning closer. Her lips parted to speak, but the words that flowed from her cracked mouth weren't coherent. Instead, they morphed into disjointed syllables, fragments of languages beyond my understanding. Panic started to bubble within me. I turned to leave, but the diners were no longer still. They shifted their heads, their hollow eyes locking onto me in unison. "We're trapped," they whispered as one, a chorus of ghostly voices rising like a fog that wrapped itself tightly around my mind. "You don't belong here." No. "I want to go back," I cried out, but the darkness responded with sinister laughter. The diner began to pulse rhythmically, and I felt the ground undulate beneath my feet, threatening to consume everything in this horrifying pocket of existence. The laughter grew louder, morphing into a cacophony that shattered my thoughts, forcing me to cover my ears in desperation. Shadows began to dance along the walls, twisting and writhing, forming nightmarish shapes that pulsed as if alive. Among them, I discerned my sister's face, her eyes once more wide with terror, her mouth moving with silent screams. "Help us! Help me!" Her voice called out, piercing through the stew of ghastly sounds, and I felt my heart lurch. The horror imploded in on itself, and I watched helplessly as my surroundings morphed again. The diner dissolved into a swirling darkness, and I was thrown into another location altogether, a fog-enshrouded cemetery, stones crumbling into ancient dust. An otherworldly howling echoed in the distance, a melancholic serenade that vibrated through the ground. Moonlight filtered through the thick mist, illuminating headstones that bore names I could no longer recall, yet felt intimately entwined with. As I wandered deeper, a figure emerged, shrouded in shadows. It moved with a grace that defied both life and death, and I felt a pull toward it, the same irresistible force that had haunted my waking moments. My heart skipped at the sight of a familiar silhouette. It was her, the embodiment of all my anxieties birthed into form. Wisps of fog curled around her as she beckoned me closer, a ghostly visage that I longed to embrace. "You know the way," she said, her voice a seductive whisper, promising solace that never came. "Why are you here?" I trembled, desperation thickening the air around us. "Because I am you," she replied, her laughter echoing like shattered glass. As she stepped closer, I noticed the way her reflection morphed in the cracks of the stones beneath our feet, taking on the forms of everyone I had ever lost. "You've abandoned us, but you can still bring us home." No. "I refuse," I screamed, the sound lost to the wind. My memories flickered like dying stars, families, friends, faces dear to me, each visage swallowed up by a deeper darkness that lurked beyond the glow of the moonlight. I felt them beckon, pleading for liberation from whatever torment tethered them to this forsaken place, but before I could react, the earth trembled beneath me. The graves began to split apart, and from the fissures, skeletal hands clawed their way out into the night, inviting me into their arms, seeking refuge in flesh that no longer belonged to the living. "They need you," my sister urged, pointing toward the chaos, but I couldn't take another step into that abyss, into the hall of the dead. And just as I turned to flee, a bone-chilling realization enveloped me, threatening to drown me in despair. The helpless figures that had once called me lost souls were now rising, chasing me into the void. The ground heaved, and as I staggered back, a masked figure stepped into the pale light, its hollow eyes fixated on me, carrying the weight of my worst fears. "Home is but a heartbeat away," it gravely uttered, a sliver of malice curling the corner of its lips. The earth beneath my feet cracked open further as a cacophony of anguished cries surged forth. I stumbled toward the darkness, knowing that whatever was lurking just beyond the veil of my nightmares was now asking me to take that final step. Would I dare confront what I had buried, or allow myself to drown in the dark embrace of everything I had lost? And before I could decide, a deafening roar erupted, drowning out all reason, and the ground threatened to swallow me whole. The roar subsided into a whisper, low and melodic, as if the earth itself conspired to pull me deeper into despair. I felt the ground churning beneath me as though it were breathing, the skeletal hands of the newly risen dead clawing at my ankles, their cold fingers slipping through my flesh like shadows through light. I recoiled through the gap of crumbling stones, struggling to escape the deepening maw of darkness that beckoned me forward. Where do you think you're going? The masked figure called out, its voice slick with mockery. Tendrils of fog wrapped around my legs, drawing me back towards the gaping graves. I swallowed the bile rising in my throat, panting from the overwhelming sense of dread that seeped into every pore. I had faced horrors before, but this was a trap woven from the fabric of my own memories, and with each step backwards, they relentlessly dragged me closer into their grasp. Turn around. A voice wailed from the depths of the cemetery. I recognized it instantly, my sister's voice, layered with agony yet thick with urgency. My heart hammered in my chest as I gazed into the swirling mist, straining to see her face emerge between the tombstones. But all that met my gaze were distorted shapes that shivered in the moonlight, their eyes glistening like desperate stars, appeals written across their rotting features. Help us. You can help us. Another voice pleaded, forcing its way through the mist. Each whisper became a physical pressure, clinging to my skin, threatening to drown me in the sorrow of those I had failed to save. I felt my resolve falter as their cries echoed around me. No. I screamed, turning to flee, but a wave of frigid air struck against me, shoving me back into the thick fog. The masked figure, now closer, loomed like a malevolent specter, its eyes pools of dark forever. You can't escape what you've left behind. You brought this upon yourself. Stop. I gasped, the chaos swirling within me, with regret clawing its way to the surface. I could see the flash of memories in those hollow eyes, countless missed opportunities, lost connections. It was all solidifying into one monstrous truth. I had abandoned them. Join us, the figure suggested, tilting its head with a predatory grace, offering me a hollow hand extended from the shadows. Embrace the darkness. They want you, and soon enough, they will take what's theirs. In that moment, every ounce of rational thought fled. Memories flooded my sense: slaughter at family gatherings, forgotten birthdays, and the warm embrace of love that I had forsaken in pursuit of something that felt entirely fleeting. The world around me trembled, morphing into countless scenes of my life replaying with agonizing clarity. The cemetery became a theater of my failures, each ghost twisting into the form of someone I had hurt, neglecting, or lost. Help us. My sister cried, her fragile voice piercing through the cacophony of the past. A blinding urgency gripped my heart. I had to act. Why should I? I screeched, my desperation erupting into a furious pitch. You're all gone. Why should I save ghosts that were once, but can never be again? Because we still exist, trapped in this web of your making, the masked figure hissed, weaving authority through its plea. And we will always pull you back. I felt the sincerity in its words, a cruel echo of my own shadowed thoughts. It bared a grin not of joy, but the kind that thrived on the anguish of the living. That I stumbled backward, my vision blurring, and just then, the fog parted, revealing a new depth to this horror. I saw not just faces, but an entire web of lost souls tangled in the vines of despair, their faces indistinguishable yet familiar. These were the reflections of my own insanity, reminders of every pore in my psyche that I had haphazardly covered under layers of denial. What do you want from me? I pleaded. Why do you haunt me still? Because we seek salvation, and you are the key, echoed a chorus of spectral voices, weaving through the air like an elegy. I took a shuddering breath, realization pricking at my consciousness as it coalesced into a single word: redemption, but instinct told me it was another trap. Another attempt by the darkness to draw me in. I staggered back, as the ground heaved and roots snaked up to ensnare my feet, a desperate grip of desperation that tugged me toward the hollow of the graves. Join us. Find peace. My sister's voice implored, stretching from the cauldron of shadows. Or be lost forever. The masked figure stepped forward, extracting a tattered photograph from seemingly nowhere. The image was distorted but recognizable. It was a family photo, my family, their faces pulsating with terrified energy. Save them, or lose everything you once held dear. As I reached for the photograph, as reality twisted into an unsettling, spiraling dance around me, I felt a violent tug at the edges of my sanity. The shadows clawed at me, and visibility flickered like a dying bulb, the faces of the dead now morphing into one vis-a-vis twisted reflection of my own. What path will you choose? The masked figure taunted right before the fog thickened to an impenetrable wall of shadows. Time is running out, the ground rumbled ominously, fissures opening beneath me, darkness mixing with light, sparkles of terror intertwining within the shadows surrounding me. And that's when I saw Ida's silhouette lurking behind the veil, familiar but monstrous. My heart sank as it took form, stretching its skeletal hands, emerging from the shadows to claim me. Everything I thought was dead now lived, hungry for recognition, eager for release. With only seconds to spare, I realized I had to confront the darkness both around me and within me as I watched the very face I had failed to save donning an unholy grin. Before I could react, a flash of blinding light erupted, scattering the shadows and revealing the truth beneath what I had suppressed. The horror I had ignored was about to reclaim me. In that instant, I was left standing at the edge of all I had fled from. The fog began to swirl again, not to encase me but to pull me under completely, and I knew deep down that this time, there was no escaping the terrifying grip of déjà vu. My breath caught in my throat as the light faded, leaving behind an oppressive darkness that wrapped itself around me like a suffocating shroud. I stood paralyzed, frantically hunting for the silhouette that had momentarily pierced the void, but it now lingered out of reach, lurking behind the veil of shadow. In the depths of the cemetery, the chilling whispers returned, a cacophony of souls, desperately yearning for release, each voice twisting my name into a haunting plea. Come back, they echoed, merging into a single sorrowful chorus that pulled at the strings of my heart. The walls of the graveyard seemed to constrict, shrinking the world around me as though it, too, were suffocated by memories too terrible to endure. I stumbled deeper into the cemetery, moving further away from whatever semblance of safety the world had offered, ensnared in the riddle of a reality I couldn't escape. Help us. My sister's voice curled around me anew, fierce with desperation, tearing through the veil of shadows to reach me. But as I ran in its direction, something monstrous loomed near me, a figure grotesquely similar to her, a twisted reflection that mirrored her familiar traits yet carried an ominous aura that sent shivers down my spine. Do you really think she wants to be saved from paradise? It whispered, the voice accompanied by a low, twisted laugh that echoed off the stones, slithering underneath my skin. They are waiting, so eager to welcome you. No. Get away from her. I bellowed, diving towards the deceitful apparition, but as it dissolved into the fog, I suddenly felt the ground quake beneath me. The earth shuddered violently, a building surge as if aware of my turmoil, foreshadowing something unnatural that loomed just below the surface. From the depths of the cemetery emerged fingers skeletal and unfathomably long, creeping from the fissures in the earth, clawing at my ankles, pulling me closer to ruin. I cried out, fighting against the chilling grip that threatened to swallow me whole. The air thickened, saturated with anguish, the essence of despair tangible as I smelled the taint of decay mingling with fresh earth. With a surge of adrenaline, I yanked my feet free and stumbled back, only to collide with an unseen force. I turned, eyes wide, meeting the blank stare of another spectre, no longer a phantom but a grotesque whisper of the life I left behind. This one was my father, or whatever nightmare had coalesced from my memory of him, a gruesome mask of betrayal etched upon his face. You abandoned us, he hissed, the ground trembling beneath him as if resonating with his words. We're still here, binding you to your sins. Where will you run? In that moment, the cemetery shifted around me, tombstones bending and warping into cruel parodies of comfort. I heard the howl of lost souls tragically bleeding into the air, echoing through the trees and intertwining with the fog to create an ominous symphony of sorrow. Each note seemed to surge in time with my racing pulse, reminding me of the gravity of my existence, while the weight of every choice I had ever made gravitated back to me, smothering me like a suffocating shroud. Then came the peculiar sound, a distant, rhythmic thud that began to take shape and focus. I turned towards the source, only to see the ground rise again, a mound of earth churning as if it were birthing something unspeakably vile from its bowels. My stomach twisted with horror, the familiar churning feeling returning, battling with every ounce of bravery I struggled to claim. The figure emerged next, monstrous with writhing limbs, a grotesque parody of life, an abominable creature with familiar features contorted into symbols of torment. My mother's eyes stared back at me, though no recognition lingered within them, only endless void and hunger. Join us, she croaked in a voice fractured by agony, as her hands opened wide, as if inviting me to be swallowed by the very shadows that had once consumed her. I staggered back, a scream clawing at my throat, trying desperately to fight against the encroaching tide of horror. But the cemetery, with its living dead and anguished spirits, pressed closer, enclosing me in a sphere of misery that gleamed with malice like shards of broken glass glinting in the moonlight. In one last bid, I turned on my heels, running through the fog that twisted in nightmare shapes around me, attempting to escape the labyrinthine cemetery. I could feel their despair breathing on my neck, their cold whispers promising suffering, promising remembrance. With fervor spurring me on, I barreled through the mass of shadows, the graves blurring into sketches of suffering as I sought the exit amidst the swirling mass of the past. But just as I felt the cusp of freedom creeping in, the ground erupted beneath me in a burst of shadows. The creatures of my memory lunged forward, their cold fingers piercing through my skin as I tumbled into a gaping maw that had opened beneath my feet. As I fell through the darkness, a chilling laughter resonated in my ears, echoing with the screams of the dead yet to be silenced. Everything blurred, the tether to reality snapping as I plunged deeper into an abyss of horrors. Then, in the silence before the end, the feeling of being watched enveloped me, leading me to the crushing realization that this was only the beginning. That a kaleidoscope of memories flooded my vision, the faces of my family slowly morphing into countless versions of themselves, all versions I had buried, ignored, and cast away. They enveloped me in jubilant whispers yet sharp with malice, voices rising in a chorus that crescendoed painfully. Suddenly, everything went dark. Drifting in an unsettling void, I gasped for air, frantically clawing at the air around me. And then, in that suffocating darkness, I felt the warmth of a breath against my ear, the familiar, horrifying voice of the masked figure whispering with a sinister thrill. Welcome home. A scream reverberated through the void, swallowed by the shadows that rejoiced in my descent into madness. The darkness lingered, thick and cloying, wrapping around me like an oblivious lover. I floated in the void, helpless, as time twisted and distorted, moments stretching into eons. With each breath, despair clung to my lungs like wet ash, choking me as I strained to notice anything beyond the eternal blackness. A dizzying weight hung in the air, a suffocating gravity that pulled me deeper into madness. But then a flicker of light pierced the void, like a star in a cloudy sky, its flickering glow beckoning me forth. I swam toward it, my heart racing as hope wrestled with fear. The light swelled, expanding into a windowno, a port alto, something grotesque yet familiar. With a shuddering gasp, I tumbled through, stumbling onto the cold ground of a disassembled reality. That I stood in a familiar room, the walls draped in peeling wallpaper, faded photographs hung crookedly on the walls. It was my childhood home, preserved in a state of decay. An unsettling warmth enveloped me, an uncanny contrast to the void I had just escaped. But as I turned to explore, I felt a heavy sensation of being watched, the gaze of something that did not belong. The air was thick with a stench I couldn't quite place, sweet, yet pungent, like charred flowers. Shadows slithered along the periphery of my vision, whispering to me in fragmented memories I dared not face. A heavy creak resonated from the floorboards above, drawing my attention as if calling my name. It was followed by the unmistakable sound of laughter, light-hearted and innocent, like echoes of a time I could scarcely remember. Come play with us. The laughter beckoned, dripping with honeyed temptation. Against my better judgment, I leapt up the staircase, driven by a mix of trepidation and morbid curiosity. As I reached the top, the door to my old bedroom hung ajar, swinging eerily in an unseen breeze. I pushed it open, and the scent of familiarity wrapped around me. Inside stood a mirror, cracked and weathered, reflecting not just my image but a myriad of indistinct figures behind me. They flickered in and out, their faces swimming just beyond recognition, their whispers rising in urgency. Suddenly, the room twisted like a funhouse, the walls bending inward and the floor shifting beneath me. Each pulse of the house resonated like a heart, and the laughter grew louder, enriched with a sense of dread. Don't you remember us? A figure emerged from the shadows, an incarnation of innocence and horror, me sister, looking precisely as she had the summer before she vanished. Her eyes twinkled with joy, yet they betrayed a shade of sorrow, a glimmer of something darker hidden behind her innocent smile. I stumbled backward, colliding with the dresser. What are you? I gasped, half sobbing as I fought against an overwhelming wave of emotions: love, guilt, nostalgia. My sister, the last memory I had clung to, came closer, though her shape distorted with every heartbeat, blurring into those who had been lost. Nothing but a memory, she whispered, sweetness laced with malice. But now, you can stay here with us forever. Pain bore down upon my chest as another crack echoed throughout the room, reverberating deep within me, like a breaking dam. I shook my head, backing away as panic surged. No. I won't be trapped here. But the walls creaked, and suddenly the mirror shattered, spilling shards like liquid shadows across the floor. Each piece began to reflect not only my horrified face but fragments of memory as my family's tormented souls, their grief seeping through the cracks. From my shattered reflection, skeletal hands reached forth, clawing at my skin, dragging me closer to my pasta grasp of love twisted into insatiable hunger. Their eyes were hollow, pleading yet laced with anger and regret, and the laughter turned to wails, shrieks rising to an unbearable pitch. The world warped in chaotic patterns as the figures liquefied, merging with the darkness that stood encroaching on all sides. With desperate fervor, I turned away from the mirror, sprinting towards the door, slamming it shut behind me. But instead of a hallway, I emerged into a void littered with endless doors, each frame whispering a tale of despair. Hands gripped my shoulders from behind, spinning me around. It was my mother, her sunken eyes glowing with an eerie light that spoke of malice. "Where are you going, sweetheart?" she crooned, her voice a melodic sigh laced with venom. "We just want you to join us." Before I could respond, the ground trembled violently, collapsing beneath my feet as shadows surged upwards like hungry waves. I gasped, the ground twisting into a grotesque mouth opening wide, ready to swallow me whole. I stumbled, my legs faltering as screams filled my ears, echoes of lost hopes and shattered dreams. As I fell again into the unfathomable abyss, the last words of my mother twisted around my brain, crushing the air from my lungs as reality morphed anew. "You can never escape us, you are one of us." In an instant, despair turned to fury, igniting a defiance I had thought perished along with my hope. I would not let their shadows consume me, not now. But just as I summoned a flicker of resistance, the darkness responded with a cruel roar, pulling me deeper into its maw. Before I could gather my thoughts, I felt something reach out, something ancient, waiting patiently in the depths of the churning darkness. The shock jolted through me, heart frozen in terror at the apparent possibility of it being something far worse than I had ever imagined. It was then that I realized, I wasn't just falling, I was being hunted. And whatever lurked in the shadows below was eager to make me its next prey. The sensation of weightlessness tugged at my limbs as the void twisted around me. I willed my body to float, to escape the impeding predator that drifted just beyond my reach. But instead, I was drawn irreversibly downward, deeper into an expanse of darkness stitched with unseen horrors. The echoes of the laughter and cries faded into a haunting symphony, lingering long after I thought I had left them behind. As I fell, flashes of memories echoed like thunder in my skull, each one a distinct fragment of laughter or sorrow, moments of joy tainted by a familiarity that scraped at the edges of my mind. Faces morphed in and out of view, not unlike the flickers of the mirror shards I had left behind. They whispered warnings of impending doom, curling around my heart like creeping vines. I landed with a thud, crashing onto a floor slick with an unnerving warmth. Compelled by instinct, I forced myself to stand, bracing against the wall for support, my breath catching in my throat as I realized where I was. It was another room, this one even more grotesque than before, an amalgamation of time periods and places, shifting like a painter's palette full of dried and smudged colors. Stale air choked me as I took in the details, shelves lined with dismembered dolls, their painted faces twisted in expressions of eternal horror, eyes seemingly following my movements with a life of their own. A tattered rocking chair swayed ominously in the corner, marred by rusted chains that wound around its legs, creaking rhythmically as if something unseen occupied it. "Welcome back," a voice cooed, sweet and sing-song, the personification of innocence twisted with a sinister edge. My pulse quickened, dread pooling in my stomach as the source of the voice came into view. A girl, no older than 8, floated in mid-air, surrounded by a halo of flickering candles that cast grotesque shadows across her porcelain skin. But it was her eyes' black pools that swallowed light that rendered me utterly paralyzed. "We've been waiting for you. It's more fun with you here," she said, her grin wide and impossibly cheerful. "Who are you?" I croaked, backing away, my mind racing to connect the dots of my spiraling reality. She was not merely a specter, she was a manifestation of the house's darkness, an echo of what had gone wrong in this cursed space. That I am Emily, she replied, spinning gently, her hair trailing behind her like ink in water. And I can help you find what you've lost. The absurdity of her offer sent a chill down my spine. What I had lost was riddled with pain, and I wanted nothing more than to escape its clutches, yet my heart ached with an inexplicable yearning. What do you mean? I asked cautiously, squinting against the flickering light. Your family, she chirped in a sing-song voice. They miss you too. They don't want you to leave us again. Before I could digest her words, the walls trembled as an amorphous shape surged behind her, a mass of shadow twisting and coiling like steam rising from hot pavement. It coalesced into form, a long-lost figure I once cherished. My brother stood there, his face shattered with despair and anger, a distorted reflection of everything I once knew. Don't listen to her, he cried, his voice a booming echo that ricocheted off the walls. This is a trap. You must fight. Why would you want to escape, brother? Emily pouted, her playful demeanor shifting into something sharper, more sinister. You belong with us. This place is full of love. The love that has been waiting for you, love? I shouted, my voice rising above the din. This isn't love. It's a cage. The air thickened with tension as the shadows pulsed vibrantly. It felt as if the very structure of reality was about to fracture, shatter like the mirror I had abandoned. My brother's figure flickered, wavering between flesh and shadow, the light of recognition mingling with despair as Emily's laughter swelled, becoming a cacophony that swallowed reason. You'll never leave, she screeched, the glee draining from her infectious smile. Join us. It's so easy. My heart raced, and instinct propelled me forward, away from their grasp. But as I turned to escape, the floor began to crack and crumble beneath me, worming its way toward an unfathomable abyss that lingered just below the surface. With every ounce of strength, I leaped towards a door at the far end of the room, hope clinging desperately as my fingers reached the handle. I flung it open, only to face a swirling storm of memories and shadows, each one screaming for my attention, each more heart-wrenching than the last. No! I screamed, the roar of voices enveloping me, plunging me deep into a flight of tangled recollections. Then, out of the chaos, I felt something clutch at me from behind, claws jabbing into my ribs, drawing blood. I turned, only to see Emily's distorted visage, her eyes glimmering with unholy delight. Stay with us, she hissed, her voice echoing a chorus of midnight whispers. You're too precious to lose. That I was trapped, surrounded by the depths of my own past and the darkness that hungered for my despair. I could feel my heart race as I turned back to the door, every instinct screaming for me to escape, but it slammed shut with a thunderous boom, locking me in with the shadows that craved my surrender. And as I heard my brother's voice beckon from beyond, you can't escape the truth, you are one of us now, I knew with bone-deep certainty that the horror was only just beginning. I stood there, encased in a cocoon of shadows, my skin prickling with the weight of my family's presence, a weight not born of love but of unspeakable horror. The darkness curled around my limbs, fast and relentless, waiting for my surrender. Every heartbeat echoed in my ears, each moment stretching into eternity like a sacrificial offering. Remember? Emily's voice chimed sweetly, a chilling melody that danced on the humid air. You were one of us before you ran away. You can have it all again. I stumbled back, desperation clawing at my chest. No! I gasped, lunging toward a window that shimmered with some remaining light. I realized then the silhouettes surrounding me were burgeoning with every flicker of hope. The more I fought, the stronger the shadows grew. My mother, father, and brother pushed forward, their faces a collage of pleading eyes and mouths twisted in unholy smiles. Come, it's time to come home. My resolve quaked as I remembered the joyful moments before, the unraveling, the laughter, the celebrations, the bliss, all tainted by birthright curses hidden beneath layers of vivid denial. The shadows writhed hungrily, circling around my feet, pulling me closer to the encroaching darkness that now whispered secrets I had buried. Love is waiting, they sang, each pulse of sound an invisible thread tangling me deeper into their web. They wanted to reclaim me in the cruelest fashion, to twist my love into a dagger. I felt the familiar rush of déjà vu, the horrors of the past blending seamlessly with the present. Surely, I had faced this before. Surely, it could not imprison me again. Fight, damn it, my brother's voice broke through the darkness. You don't want to join them. In that moment of clarity, I remembered our family had been shattered not just by death but by the silence of unspoken truths. We did not choose to abandon each other, time and choices had ruptured the bonds, until only this wretched cycle of despair remained, ready to drag me down once more. The echoes of long-lost laughter thrashed against the oppressive air, they urged me to succumb. I echoed back a scream, a primal declaration of defiance. With newfound resolve, I ripped through the cocoon, forcing my way through the writhing tendrils and the lies. With one last surge of will, I threw myself against the window, shattering it in an explosion of spectral shards. Light burst through the gaps, flooding the room as if the dawn had come to cleanse away the night. I felt the exultation of escape push against the shadows. Freedom was imminent. But as I breached the threshold, I heard a familiar voice, a haunting remnant of love, that clawed into me with blinding recognition. Come home. It was more than a plea, it was an unholy command that swept over me like a tide. And as I turned back to the darkness, I found it reshaping itself into the faces I once cherished, each creature shifting back into my beloved family, twisted and encased in anguish. They were lost, not just to me but to themselves, forever bound to the cursed reality of illusions and echoes. Join us, they hissed, their voices layering into a haunting symphony. I now realized the madness I had defended against was not an external force but the memories, the core of my very being. What have I done? I whispered, horror gathering as my heart descended into an icy pit of betrayal. In my quest to escape, I had fueled their suffering, granted them the power to latch onto me, to hitch their darkness to my flickering soul. In that moment, the shadows surged, reclaiming their grasp on me. I realized as I bent before the edge of the delectable abyss I had unleashed, that those I loved were both tormentors and companions in this dance of despair. Thus, I stood there, as the door swung shut, sealing away the specter of hope. The last remnants of light flickered and drew back, and I felt myself melding with the darkness, plunging deep into the wailing symphony of lost souls. I was no longer merely one of them. I became the harbinger, the orchestrator of the cycle of despair, fated to draw others into the same fatal embrace. As the vast void encased me, the terrifying truth settled like ashes upon my chest. I had not escaped. I had simply inherited the curse, becoming not just part of the family but embodying the very evil that lingered in the depths, the insatiable hunger of déjà vu. And finally, with the last echo of their pleas whispering through the shadows, I understood the haunting truth that would resonate long after everything else faded. The horror was not just in what awaited me at the end, it was in the realization that I had only just begun to become truly home at last.